What you are about to discover will change the way you see scientific history forever. Inside every living thing on this planet is a code. A blueprint of unimaginable complexity that dictates every detail of our existence. For centuries, it was the greatest mystery in all of science. Unlocking it would mean unlocking the very secret of life itself. And in the middle of the 20th century, the race to solve it was on. But the story you've been told about that discovery, a story of two brilliant men in a Cambridge laboratory, is not the whole truth. Because the key that unlocked the puzzle, the single most important piece of evidence in human history, was captured by a woman, and then it was stolen in plain sight. This is the story of the photograph that changed the world, and the forgotten woman who took it. After the devastation of World War II, a new kind of battle began. Not on fields of war, but in the quiet laboratories of Europe. The prize was not territory, but knowledge. The ultimate prize, the structure of a molecule known as DNA. Scientists knew it carried the instructions for life, but they had no idea what it looked like or how it worked. It was a three-dimensional puzzle of cosmic importance, and whoever solved it first would win a Nobel Prize and a permanent place in history. In this race, the frontrunners were thought to be at Cambridge University, a brash, ambitious young American named James Watson and his brilliant British collaborator, Francis Crick. They were theorists, model builders, men with a burning desire for glory. But they had a problem. They were working in the dark, guessing at the shape of a ghost. They lacked the one thing they needed most: hard data. That data was being meticulously gathered, miles away, at King's College London. And the person gathering it was a scientist named Rosalind Franklin. To understand what happens next, you must first understand who Rosalind Franklin was. She was not an assistant. She was a world-class chemist and an expert in a highly specialized, brutally difficult technique called X-ray crystallography. It was a dark art of science. A process that involved shooting powerful beams of X-rays at a microscopic crystal for up to 100 hours at a time, just to capture a single, shadowy photograph of the molecule's structure. It required a level of patience, precision, and genius that few possessed. Before coming to King's, Franklin had become a leading expert in her field in Paris. She was recruited to King's College specifically to lead the DNA research. But from the moment she arrived, she walked into a toxic environment. The head of her unit, Maurice Wilkins, treated her not as a peer, but as a subordinate. In the gentleman's club atmosphere of 1950s British academia, she was an outsider, a woman in a man's world, and a fiercely independent one at that. She worked in near total isolation, trusting only in the purity of her work. And it was her work that was about to produce a masterpiece. But this is where everything takes a turn. Over months of painstaking effort, Franklin perfected her technique. She had refined the DNA sample into two distinct forms and was capturing images of unprecedented clarity. And then, in May of 1952, after a 100-hour exposure, she developed a single image. It was labeled simply, Photograph 51. It was a ghostly, ethereal image. A stark, black cross of smudges against a gray background. To a layperson, it meant nothing. But to a trained eye, it was a revelation. It was the secret of life, captured in a shadow. The distinct X pattern was the undeniable signature of a helix shape. The spacing of the smudges revealed the exact dimensions of the molecule. She had it. She had captured the key that would unlock everything. But Rosalind Franklin was a scientist of profound integrity. She believed in proof, not leaps of faith. She knew what the photograph meant, but she would not publish or announce her findings until she had gathered all the evidence and her analysis was complete. And what happened next shocked even the experts. While Franklin was methodically continuing her work, the ambitious duo at Cambridge, Watson and Crick, were growing desperate. Their first attempt at a model had been a humiliating failure. They were stuck. The race was on, and they were losing. In January of 1953, James Watson visited King's College. There, he met with Maurice Wilkins. Frustrated by his own lack of progress and his difficult relationship with Franklin, Wilkins did something that would alter the course of scientific history. He led Watson into a room, opened a drawer, and showed him photograph 51. Without Rosalind Franklin's knowledge, without her permission. This is the point where the story becomes unbelievable. For Watson, the moment he saw the image, everything changed. It was the bolt of lightning he had been waiting for. He didn't need to perform the calculations or understand the deep crystallography. He recognized the pattern instantly. The X screamed Helix. He raced back to Cambridge, his mind on fire. The image of her photograph burned into his memory. Using the precise dimensions and helical structure revealed in Franklin's photograph, and further data from her unpublished reports, which had also been passed to Cambridge without her consent, Watson and Crick rapidly built their new model. The pieces all clicked into place, but they were her pieces. It was her data that provided the framework, her discovery that lit the path. Within weeks, they had solved the puzzle. The double helix was revealed to the world. This was the climax. The race was over, but it had been won with a stolen key. In April 1953, the journal Nature published 3 articles. The first and most famous was by Watson and Crick, announcing their discovery of the double helix. Buried further back in the same issue were 2 other papers, one by Rosalind Franklin and one by Maurice Wilkins, presenting the data that supported the model. Her groundbreaking photograph was published as a secondary thought, a mere confirmation of their brilliant discovery. They had won the glory, and she was relegated to a footnote in her own story. 9 years later, in 1962, the Nobel Prize for the discovery of DNA structure was awarded to James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins. Rosalind Franklin was not mentioned. She had died 4 years earlier, at the age of just 37, from ovarian cancer, a disease likely caused by the very X-rays she had used to uncover the secret of life. The Nobel Prize is never awarded posthumously. Her contribution, the critical piece of the puzzle, was erased from the official narrative. For decades, the world celebrated Watson and Crick as the solitary geniuses who had unlocked the code. But the truth does not stay buried forever. It was only when Watson later published his own memoir, callously detailing the moment he was shown her photograph, that the full story began to emerge. He admitted, in his own words, that seeing her data had been the critical moment. Rosalind Franklin was not a victim. She was a brilliant scientist who was on the verge of solving the puzzle herself on her own terms. Her legacy is not one of tragedy, but of profound, unrecognized excellence. She took the photograph that allowed us to see ourselves for the first time. And the truth is, this story isn't finished yet. It forces us to ask, how many other hidden figures, how many other stolen photographs are still waiting in the footnotes of history?